لو تخينا مسك نوفر لنا نفرح بلنا كنتبع لنا سبسي أي تفرح له نحق فرح نزقي فرح.
I really appreciate for all of you to join us this evening, this afternoon, this morning. We are delighted to have such supporters of Afar cause, but more importantly, the supporters of democracy, rule of law, and all the well-being of regions or people in the region in general. So with that being said, I wanted to introduce everyone and welcome everyone to our discussion series on Dankalia Hangit. Dankalia, obviously, as many of you know, a traditional homeland of Afar Nation in Eritrea. Our program, Dankalia Hangit, is dedicated to all issues related to Dankalia and the Afar people. My name is Ahmed Yusuf Mohammed. I'm the president of Eritrean Afar National Congress. My organization is leading the fight for Afar self-determination in Dankalia, Eritrea, where our indigenous people are faced with existential threat, ethnic persecution, systematic policies of assimilation, and displacement from one of the best strategic corners in the Horn of Africa. That includes Port of Assab, of course. With your help, we're going to free our land, our homeland, restore our self-determination, inshallah. So thank you for joining us again. We are extremely pleased that all of you could join us. And hello to those who are following us via Facebook. There will be an opportunity for interaction and questions and answer. I'm joined here, of course, as a co-host by my brother Warren Creets, who is a member of Afar family. He received his honorary Afar citizenship as a humanitarian and as champion of Afar causes. Warren is head of immigration law at Pearlie Robertson, Hill and McDougall. Warren represents individuals, families, corporations in all aspects of immigration law. As immigration leader, Warren is highly regarded as a writer, educator in immigration law. He is one of very few practitioners certified by the Law Society of Upper Canada in three combined fields: immigration, citizenship, refugee law. He's a former government of Canada immigration lawyer. He acted as a consul to Government of Canada. China, Denmark, South Korea, and Sri Lanka. Warren is a founder of Kango Afar Foundation, a humanitarian organization providing advocacy, education, and clean water to the Afar people in the region. Please welcome Brother Wade, as he's affectionately known by the Afar people. Our next panelist is our brother Abdurrahman Said Bo Hashim, a very close friend to the Afar people and supporter of Afar causes for many years. Brother Abdurrahman Bo Hashim is born and raised in multicultural and multi-ethnic linguistic family speaking Arabic, Tigrinya. Later on, he learned Amharic, English at school, graduated in social science, international law, international relations with BA honors and master's degree in comparative federalism combined with conflict resolution. He has been a humanitarian and political rights activist for the last 30 years. He is a frequent contributor to Eritrean opposition international media as a political analyst and campaigner. So welcome, Brother Abdurrahman Bo Hashim. Also, I want to, our final panelist, of course, is Professor Joseph Magnet. He's a well-known, is also honorary Afar citizen, was given to him, awarded to him by Afar state president and Afar traditional leaders and political leaders in the diaspora and at home. He traveled to Afar state in Samara, where he in Isaita, and where he met Afar refugees. He is also affectionately known as Madahaba, a father of constitution by the Afar people. Professor Magnet is one of Canada's most respected constitutional lawyer. He's a professor of law at the University of Ottawa, an experienced constitutional litigator and advisor, have acted as a counsel in more than 200 constitutional cases in Supreme Court of Canada, including as a lead counsel of for the Government of Canada, Supreme Court of Canada appeals, advisor to Canadian federal, provincial, and territorial government on constitutional matters, as well as other governments around the world. He was elected to the Royal Society of Canada in 1998. He is currently the lead legal counsel to the Afar Nation in the Horn of Africa. We are very proud to have Professor Magnet joining us today. Professor Magnet will present his key presentation, followed by Brother Abdurrahman, and we will have, like I said, interactions from a group in the Zoom, as well as questions, if available, from those who are following us in Facebook. To give you a background of our agenda for the evening, we are talking constitutional law, democratic governance in the region. We will address conflict resolution. We will also discuss critical factors for finding sustainable peaceful solutions to end bloody conflict in Ethiopia, in the region. We will address nation building versus the rights of nations and nationality. What will be the choice for Ethiopia after the war? Will it be continuation of ethnic federalism to govern the nation? Will it be centralized Ethiopia, or will it be a strong decentralized new Ethiopia? We will, of course, speak about what role the Afar nation can play in the next phase of this nation building. We will also speak about Eritrea and its stabilizing actions in the region, especially in Ethiopian war. It's a full agenda, and we hope to we have the expert panel we have here can address these topics no problem. So Professor Magnet, given the Ethiopian civil war against the regional state of Tigray has been raging since November 2020. Tens of thousands are dead. 7 million people are living in famine-like conditions. More than 2 million people have fled their homes. The United Nations, the United States, the African Union have all been trying to get the warring factions to negotiate a peaceful resolution. Only in recent days has Ethiopia responded to the international pressure. Last week, the government of Ethiopia released some Tigrayan politician prisoners, Oromo and Oromo opposition leaders, including indicating the willingness to engage in this discussion. An all-inclusive national dialogue on Ethiopia's constitution is among the key demands of opposition groups. How should this dialogue take place? What options are available to reconcile the competent, those who fight warring factions, and other disenfranchised or dissatisfied Ethiopian nationalities and people of Ethiopia? With that in mind, I will hand over to you, Brother Warren. Warren Kreitz will give us a brief background on the work he does, and then we'll give the floor to Professor Magnet. Thank you very much. And I will hand to you, Brother Wade.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, for your kind words of introduction about me in particular. I'm grateful for that. It's a great honor to be participating today from my office here in Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada. I want to welcome everyone, those who will speak, those who are participating, those that are tuned in around the globe. I'm fascinated each time we do a presentation or partake in a panel such as this. I'm fascinated by how many people and where they are and what their backgrounds are and what their interests are. And the more diversity that we see in our participants and in their views, the more interested I am in hearing those views and contributing in the way I have been and will continue to do. So I want to explain my role today in three ways. First of all, I'm a lawyer, I'm an advocate, and of course, in the work that I've done for now 36 years on behalf of individuals and organizations both, I have tried to find solutions to protect people's interests, no matter where they are, where they've come from, which country and so forth, and which religion, which ethnicity. It doesn't matter to me. What matters is the rule of law. What matters is the protection of rights, which are vast and long in number, but also the protection of minority rights, which are often forgotten or not observed. So how I came to the topic after practicing for two decades, I had represented a number of people from the Horn of Africa, from Eritrea, from Djibouti, from Somalia, from Ethiopia. I had come to develop a small amount of expertise on the region and its various friction points, I'll call it. By traveling vicariously through the clients I had represented and the ethnicities they had come from, I had come to learn a lot about what was going on in the Horn of Africa. But of course, my learning was remote. I had never been there until the Afar people organized themselves here in Ottawa and came to my office and asked me to partake in a conference, which was held 14 years ago at Carleton University. So it was a campus of a university, scholars, academics, and so forth, presented, including former and current, then foreign and then current politicians here in Canada that had a particular interest in the protection of human rights. And from that conference came quite by surprise to me, an invitation to travel to Ethiopia and to go into the remote area of the Afar state, including as close as we could at the time to the borders of Eritrea and Djibouti. And that was very eye-opening. I learned firsthand by introduction of Ahmed and others to elders and political leaders, women, children, refugees. I mean, it was really fascinating to learn firsthand, now to see firsthand the many things I had heard for the decades previous. So that was kind of, for me, a fact-finding mission. We came back to Canada. We established a not-for-profit organization, which we then made application and received approvals as a registered charity in Canada so that we could deliver humanitarian aid to those people and beneficiaries in that region. So that's now 14 years in operation. We have delivered humanitarian aid in support of relief, education, and healthcare for Afar people who have come from Eritrea and Djibouti and who were born and raised in Ethiopia, who are citizens of Ethiopia. So again, just to point out, to me, it doesn't matter where people have come from. What matters to me is the need that we identified and the relief that we could provide. Ethiopia, for their part, has welcomed us and our supports, and we're very grateful for that. We have a good relationship with Ethiopia and their representatives, including here in Canada at their embassy, and we've been very grateful for what they've done to facilitate our ability to deliver the humanitarian aid. I have led 11 deployments of humanitarian workers and donors, foreign donors, by making trips 11 times into Ethiopia and into the Afar region to deliver much of the aid that I've just described. And each trip, we've had the welcome of the government of Ethiopia and the states that we've traveled through, who have facilitated our ability to help the most needy in terms of both providing and funding their education, to improve their health care, to deliver humanitarian aid to refugees who have come from Eritrea, who have been registered in 2 refugee camps, which we visit when we go. And it's really been an incredible, challenging, but also rewarding journey to have the great honor to do this kind of work. Brings incredible reward. But by so doing, I could see the enormity of the challenges and the problems, particularly in regard to Eritrea, the massive movement of refugees, those that could activate and leave and come across the border into countries such as Ethiopia and seek resettlement to other countries, including Canada, but also to Sweden and Brussels and France and the UK. Many of your participants who are joining today have been through this very journey that I've just quickly described, and they have their own personal experiences and motivations for helping in the ways that they do. And I'm very proud to acknowledge the courage that they continue to make in their volunteer work and in their pro bono work. But the point I want to provide you with at this stage in my words, as brief as they are, is that I could see that there was a bigger problem going on, and that I could spend the rest of my life and get as many people in Canada and elsewhere involved in the humanitarian work, but still never really achieve a solution to the problem. To me, the solution needed to engage with advocacy at a much greater level and skill than I have, having to do with what was going on in Eritrea. And in particular, the mistreatment of the Afar minority population there. So I went to my close friend, Professor Joseph Magnet. I told him the work that I had been doing for years, and he showed incredible quick interest in wanting to learn more, to meet Afar elders in Ottawa, to study the situation I described, to validate the things that he had heard, because as a constitutional legal expert, not just in terms of Canada, but as you heard from Ahmed in his introduction, I thought his expertise might really help, not just the Afar minority population in Eritrea, but the many other minority groups who are not well served, including the majority groups, frankly, who are not well served by the government, the regime in that country. And something needs to be done and said, and work has to be accomplished to expose what is going on in that country. And so I asked his involvement, and he has very willingly and generously provided his expertise. He is a scholar, he is an academic, he is a professor, and as I said, far beyond my very humble abilities to deploy humanitarian assistance into that region. Professor Joseph Magnet has looked at it from a very much bigger level and has proposed ideas which have a lot of traction and should gain a lot more support and interest by those tuning in today and many others who will see this broadcast once it's recorded and available for those who can't participate live. So I want to thank the Ethiopian government for all they've done to allow us to deliver humanitarian help into the Afar region, who incidentally have been designated by the Ethiopian government to be in great need. The Ethiopian government has acknowledged that, and they've been grateful to us for the work that we have done. It's easy these days to have very strong opinions and ideas in the current environment about what's going on, reference to the civil war in Ethiopia. Very easy to have strong opinions and hard ideas about this, and maybe some of those will be shared with us today. But in all of this, I think we need to find common ground, common purpose, to express ideas that have traction and ability to compromise so that the war ends and the suffering stop. And, in my 14 years of doing this for and on behalf of the Afar people, I never thought things would worsen as they now have. I never dreamt that a war would spill over into the Afar region and continue as it has. In preparation for today's conference, I made an effort to contact our local implementing partner in Ethiopia. We spoke to them live yesterday to get real updated information on what is going on in that part of the world. And we were given situation reports, which continue. I expect I'll get another one on Monday with some reports and some pictures and so forth of the last deployment of money that we sent as a foreign donor to try and alleviate some of the suffering that's going on there. So that's the first purpose of my role today. The second purpose is to play a role as co-moderator as much as I can do that. Again, as I said, we're lawyers, we're advocates, we're trained to listen and ask questions and probe and dig into some corners that haven't been expressed before now, maybe, and then to learn to contribute to where we can. And the third part, which is the third part of my role, is to introduce Professor Magnet, which I tried to do just there. There's plenty more to be said for Professor Magnet in terms of what he's done already as counsel to the Afar people. He has drafted a constitutional framework for a post-authoritarian Eritrea. We have shared that with government and non-government organizations, including the United Nations, including the European Union, including the other nationalities in Eritrea who have a very broad and wide diaspora outside of Eritrea all over the world. And we've welcomed their ideas for discussion, and we've listened, and Professor Magnet may tell you more about that. But the 3 points are to introduce the humanitarian work that I, as just team leader with many others, including Ahmed Yusuf Mohammed, have done, to speak to you about what role I can play today as moderator, and then, as I said, to introduce Professor Magnet. So my words hopefully have been not too long. I wanted to thank everyone. I want to tell you that I'm greatly honored that you would think to include me today, and the role that we can play here in Canada, because we have a federal constitution that's based on lots of history and lots of accommodation with minority and other groups, the founders of this country, and the peace that we've achieved, and the stability and the economic advantages and so forth that our constitution here in Canada has at least been able to achieve with our founding groups, English, British, French, and the Indigenous peoples. I think, as an example, Canada shines bright in what we've achieved in terms of our political stability, economic strengths. And we're a moderate country. We are middle power. And I'm glad to hear that Canada plays a role in the discussion in Ethiopia, because we've delivered humanitarian aid in the hundreds of millions of dollars for decades in Ethiopia. So we have welcomed people from Ethiopia, from Eritrea, from Djibouti, from Sudan, from Somalia, from the whole Horn of Africa, and they have settled well here. And we've learned from them, and we've accommodated those backgrounds and those peoples and their voices. They're always welcome here. Will always be moving forward. Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you for allowing me to say these words. Thank you.
I now give the floor to Professor Joseph Magnet.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. And thank you, Ahmed, for those kind words of introduction. Thank you, Warren, for those very kind words of introduction, which I very much appreciate. And let me say what a pleasure it is to be here with so many old Afar friends who I have met with personally, interchanged with, shared ideas, debated, made progress. It's just great to see you, to be with you here digitally. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you safely in person again when circumstances allow. We are meeting here as the ground in Ethiopia is drenched in blood. We are meeting here when so many lives have been lost. We are meeting here where so much treasure and progress has been despoiled. I want to back up and look at how it is that the Ethiopian state came into existence, the modern state, and what course it traveled to reach this unhappy, bloody moment. Modern Ethiopia was conceived in a very bloody revolution that was triumphant in 1990. Ethiopia is a revolutionary state inspired by revolutionary ideas, two of which form the basis of its constitution and economy. The first idea, ethnic federalism, is a constitutional system that distributes power to the nations and nationalities of the state. Where the United States Constitution begins, we, the people of the United States of America. The Ethiopian Constitution begins, we, the nations, nationalities, and people of Ethiopia, and goes on immediately to proclaim the commitment of these nations and nationalities to their right of self-determination including a right of secession. In theory, Ethiopia's ethnic federal system distributes power to each nation sufficient for that nation to control its own affairs and destiny. In other words, for each nation to self-govern. The second idea is the developmental state, and this forms the basis for Ethiopia's economy. The developmental state is a system in which a highly controlled market economy is directed by an ultra-interventionist government. In theory, the developmental state relies upon an independent professional bureaucracy at a distance from everyday politics, which steers the private sector to stated development goals. In Ethiopia, the development state exercises immense power in every sector of the economy, even in finance. And unlike any other African country, Ethiopia acts through a state-owned bank, the Development Bank of Ethiopia. It has rejected the influence of the World Bank and other neoliberal institutions. Ethiopia's development policy favors industrial development over agriculture and services. The industrial sector is dominated by Metals and Engineering Corporation, a state-owned entity managed by the military. This is the largest industrial complex in the country, and it's the primary contractor, for example, on the Grand Renaissance Dam, the largest infrastructure project in Africa's history. These two ideas, ethnic federalism and the development state, produced impressive economic results since the revolutionary movement took over a war-ravaged, starving population in 1990. Real GDP per capita more than doubled since 2004. Ethiopia experienced the highest rate of growth in Africa before the present civil war. Ethiopia is the only African country where these impressive economic results do not rely on natural resource extraction. So why is there such contestation about Ethiopia's ethnic federal system? And why is there such fragile support for Ethiopia's development model? There are several answers to these questions, and they're very relevant to the questions of the Afar that we want to consider today. First, like most developmental states, Ethiopia, despite its democratic constitutional facade, is an authoritarian state. The political system was and is dominated by a single party that marginalized the political opposition and failed to provide space for peaceful political dissent. Elections were rigged, the press controlled, journalists imprisoned. Power is concentrated in the center, in a small clique of the ruling party. Prior to 2018, the ruling party was dominated by the TPLF. This concentration of power at the center made ethnic federalism an illusion. The paper constitution distributed power to the regions, but the reality was that power was and is tightly controlled at the center. The institutions created by the Constitution are weak, controlled by the ruling party. The bureaucracy is not independent. It takes its orders from the dominant PMO. Secondly, the developmental state pushed growth successfully at the expense of equality and social development. The circle of big winners, and there are some very big winners, is very small. The TPLF used the developmental state model to deliver a disproportionate share of the growing economy to ethnic Tigrayans. Power at the center favored Tigray. Higher and lower economic status was layered over ethnic divisions, with the minority Tigrayans at the top and the majority Oromo and Amhara, to say nothing of the Afar, further down at the bottom. History teaches that this division of rich and poor, layered over ethnic and linguistic divisions, is an explosive, unstable mix, and that has proved true in Ethiopia as well. The TPLF is now gone from power, and it's unlikely to return, ever. Still, these contradictions remain in the Ethiopian state. Power is still concentrated in the center, even more tightly now than before. The program of the Prosperity Party is to move the country away from ethnic federalism and political powers based on group rights towards a unified Ethiopian national identity. Unsurprisingly, the nations and nationalities resist. Now, let's look at all of this from the perspective of the Afar nation. First question: what did ethnic federalism and the developmental state model deliver to the Afar? The answer to that question is very little. 40,000 hectares of the most fertile Afar lands in the Awash Valley were taken for sugarcane. What did the Afar get? 300 beer per person and some dry desert land kilometers away. How did it turn out? Today, the Tendaho sugar factory is closed. It's rusting. And those lands that were taken from the Afar were given to the regime's friends. Something similar is now happening with Afar potash resources. An industrial park was built by Abiy's government in Samara. That park lacks sustainable water and electricity. We'll see how long it lasts, but I'm not confident. Government promotion of agriculture is weak, the center preferring a villagization policy which displaces Afar pastoralists from their lands. Villagization has increased Afar food insecurity, compromised Afar health through changing the Afar diet, and generally depreciated the quality of Afar life. The services sector is weak in Afar state. The education sector is very weak. Social services and medical care are inadequate. There is gigantic inequality when the Afar industrial sector is compared to the industrial sector in the center. Security is not better. The 50-year-old Afar-Isa conflict has gotten steadily worse, the center refusing to end it, increasing Afar insecurity and the numbers of Afar killed by Somali Isa. 79.2% of the Afar population today live in severe poverty under the ethnic federal system and the development state, making Afar state the second poorest in the country after Somali, and much worse off than the national average. So to sum it all up, ethnic federalism and the developmental state delivered very little to Afar people. We're now in the middle of a terrible civil war in which the fundamental assumptions of the Ethiopian state are called into question. It's important, therefore, to ask, what do the Afar need? What do the Afar want? I believe there must be two types of answers to this question. The first involves the mechanisms and procedures through which the Ethiopian state will be reconfigured. In December 2021, Abiy's government passed a law creating an 11-person National Dialogue Commission. This commission excludes the most important groups contesting the present organization of the Ethiopian state. Afar need representation in any national dialogue. The Afar state, the Afar nation, is small in a big country, and to get fair representation, Afar will probably have to make alliances with dissident forces. The Afar Prosperity Party is not the right vehicle to participate in reconfiguring the constitution of the state because it represents the status quo. In any event, I doubt that a legislative-driven entity like the Dialogue Commission can achieve the reconciliation needed in Afar state, in Ethiopia. I believe that Ethiopia should establish a specially elected constituent assembly like that is now at work in Chile. I recommend Afar join forces with other groups to push for the creation of a constituent assembly independent of the Ethiopia legislature. Secondly, what are the likely Afar interests in a revised constitution? Well, this is something that will have to be discussed across Afar state and the Afar diaspora, and something that can be discussed here. But I believe the basis of that discussion can be the principles set out by the Afar elders and leaders in Samara 10 years ago. The relevant principles from that process are the rule of law, democracy, the equality of each nationality, that each nationality shall exercise rights of self-government and self-determination in a federated, autonomous region, that each nationality shall, through governments they elect, have the right to own and control their lands and resources, including surface, subsurface resources, access routes to seacoasts, fisheries, and airspace, and they shall have the right to enjoy the profits from those. That each nationality shall, through governments they freely elect, have the right to protect and preserve the vitality of their language, culture, way of life, and economy. That the rights of indigenous peoples and minorities shall be guaranteed and protected. Of course, we should learn from the past failures of the ethnic, federal, and developmental state system, which failed to deliver true equality, fair development, and progress to the Afar for the past 30 years, despite paper guarantees of equality of nations and development in the Constitution. Here, I believe we need to think through how to restrain the authoritarian tendencies of the state. I would make two suggestions in this regard. The first being to constitutionalize the independence of political parties. I believe it's where the political parties became out of control that the authoritarian state was able to operate. And also to create, secondly, a new muscular institution to protect the Constitution. At the present, the power to interpret the Constitution is in the House of Federation and its Council of Constitutional Inquiry. I believe the power to interpret the Constitution should be taken out of that institution and placed in a newly created constitutional court, which could provide very liberal means of access to ordinary citizens as well as access to nations and nationalities. I find it very interesting that now that the TPLF has been driven from power, the TPLF likely shares many interests with the small nationalities in national dialogue and constitutional revision. The TPLF is likely to want deep autonomy in a revised constitution and strong guarantees for constitutional integrity, consistent with what I believe the Afar are likely to require. The TPLF, of course, will have outsized power in any constitutional reformation or replacement, which would arise from its military capabilities and battlefield successes, power that the Afar, as a small nation, likely does not have. Afar will have to think through carefully what this means in terms of Afar orientation and alliances in any national dialogue and constitutional revision process. I personally believe the Afar are capable of great things. They are a highly independent, adaptive, courageous people. They are also wonderful people, endowed with a beautiful culture, unique language, highly refined traditions. I hope all of this will be preserved and flourish as Ethiopia is reconfigured. I also believe that as a small nation in a large country, Afar need partners and allies. Afar have been very inventive and adaptive in making friends and allies in the past, and I fully expect this to continue in these uncertain times. Thanks again for inviting me. I'm looking forward with pleasure to discussing these matters with you and to working with you in the challenging times ahead.
Thank you, Professor.
Wow. Thank you so much for that presentation. Beautiful presentation. Really captures the situation, not just the Afar situation, but the situation in Ethiopia and the region generally. So thank you very much once again, Professor Magnet.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, everyone. And I'm really delighted to be part of this interesting and very useful seminar. I was also very delighted to listen to Professor Magnet and all the details that he went through, which are very useful to this session, as well as to the whole discourse on the future of Ethiopia. So thank you very much for all this. And of course, to our colleague Warren as well for the introduction. My interest in the Afar issue is, because I'm an Eritrean, so I feel very much an Afar, not an Afar friend or a friend of the Afar people, but I am an Afar. I was in Asab when I was only 1 year old. So my father lived there for a short while, and he established very strong relationships with Afar politicians and business people. So we have that attachment to the Afars. The second issue is it's a nation that has been divided into 3 countries, not by their own choice, but by the choice of external forces. And that is Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Djibouti. And in none of these countries, Afars have had any rights respected. So it's a collective punishment of a nation that has done nothing wrong to anyone of those who have been subjecting them to punishment. So that is also the second reason why I'm so interested in the Afar issue, and I always stand in support of Afar cause, whether it's in Eritrea or outside Eritrea. Ethiopia, of course, has gone through some kind of transition that has lasted so far for 30 years. Professor Magnet did mention the revolutionary approach to the modern state of Ethiopia. But that is really the time when the TPLF, EPRDF took over power in Ethiopia in 1991. That's when the transition started. And this transition has not really come to an end. Hopefully with the next dialogue, things might change, and new Ethiopia might come out from this transition to accommodate its diversity. Prior to 1991, we had a unitary Ethiopia that was very much established by Abyssinian monarchs from the highlands, which an establishment that was based on conquering and taking over lands and settling in those lands. And then, of course, with the external agreements that they've managed to sign, whether it was the Italian colonizers or others, they brought the modern Ethiopian state from 1890 to 1991. TPLF and EPRDF had the choice what to do with Ethiopia in 1991, because that's the time where changes would have been imminent. And I feel, and I believe, I think the choice to go for a federal state was the right choice at the time. This is 1991 or even 1994 when the federal constitution, the existing constitution, was adopted. There are people who would argue that the TPLF, EPRDF introduced federalism to Ethiopia either to hold the country together, which is what the purpose of federalism is in any case, or to divide and rule the country, because they wouldn't be able to rule it centrally as the Amharas did before them. Both arguments could be right, but in either case, the importance was to redefine Ethiopia from the state that it has been through from 1890 to 1991 to a new Ethiopia that would be defined more of a composite polity, like a country that is multinational, multi-ethnic, multi-tribal, multi-so on. So, and I think that was a very important step. For whatever reason, the TPLF might have adapted it, but the step in itself, the constitution or the adoption of federalism was right. That's my conviction. The constitution, of course, declared Ethiopia as a federal republic. It recognized it as a state that is composed of different nations and nationalities, as Professor Magnet mentioned earlier. It has also recognized under Article 5 the equality of Ethiopian languages, the equal status, the equal constitutional status of the Ethiopian languages, with Amharic, of course, as a working language. But this, again, it was a new development within Ethiopian politics. And recently, I think there has been some discussion to even add more languages to the federal government's working languages. So I think Orominya or Oromo and Tigrinya and others might be added soon. So this is another step in the right direction that needs to be maintained if Ethiopia is to continue together. Under Article 47 of the same constitution that we are talking about, which was adopted on the 8th of December, 94, the state was structured in different regions or killils. And again, although there is a mention of 9 states, and I think recently they've become now 10 or 11, but again, this is a manifestation of self-rule, which is what, again, what federalism is about, to allow people and different groups to have the right to self-rule. Whether that was implemented or not, of course, it's another issue, but I'm talking just about the constitution as it is. There is nothing, or there isn't something that would worry you a lot in its contents. It's got all the universal human rights, the freedom to expression, freedom of thought, and all sorts of other rights that are universal. And as a man-made document, of course, there will be a need for some kind of reform to that constitution, but not to go away from the federal system adopted in 1994, 95. There are some provisions, of course, to accommodate some within this constitution's minority rights. Again, within the parliament, which is can be categorized as the lower house, at least around 20 seats are reserved for minority nationalities and peoples, which is, again, another way of engaging and including minorities. The only problem which I hope the dialogue or the discussion will address would be the upper house, or the federal, or the House of Federation. In here, normally most federal states adapt in a bicameral system. They take the upper house to represent all the states, or maybe the nations and nationalities equally. However, in the case of the Ethiopian constitution, which is defined under Article 61, sub-article 1 and 2, it does allow the majority nations or nationalities to have more representatives in the House of Federation. And my argument against that was, if you have a majoritarian situation in the lower house, then having another majoritarian status in the upper house, it means there will be a control of majoritarian rule, and that may not satisfy many of the minorities who may not have the numerical status to have a say. So that's one issue that may need to be looked at the current constitution, that would need to be looked and probably reviewed. In terms of the discussion that is going on right now, it's not so much about centralization or decentralization. It's very much, I think, about a federal or unitary state, because a unitary state can also become a decentralized state. So the centralization, decentralization may not define very much the discussion that Ethiopia is entering into. As I said earlier, since 1890, Ethiopia has been a unitary state. In fact, in many cases, a very absolutist monarchy, ruled by monarchs who had some kind of like holiness, supported very much by the religious institution in the country. So there wouldn't be any thoughts of coming out against them, except that, of course, in the case of Emperor Haile Selassie towards his latter years, he was challenged by the army and then by students and other movements much later in the early 70s. So, but there is this tradition, and I think one of the failures of the TPLF to lead on implementing the constitution that it very much led on was this tradition of centralized rule of the country. And also, although Ethiopia was a federal in terms of the constitution, but in terms of practices for the last 30 years, it was very much a unitary state, in fact, a one-party dictatorship at one point I called it. So that's how it continued. And this is the question that those people who might think maybe the TPLF adapted federalism not genuinely, but just to probably sideline the challenge that could potentially, or could have potentially come from the Amhara side, and therefore the theory that this was about divide and rule seems to be quite true. Otherwise, there would have been more self-ruled rights within the regions, as well as shared rule within the national government. So, but under TPLF, none of this were in existence. And my fear is also this tradition might continue even under the current government. So replacing one centralized dictatorship or majoritarian control by another. Although the TPLF might have not been a majority in terms of the people or the constituents it represented, but clearly through the EPRT, it managed to control all the government organs. My belief is majority of Ethiopians, including from the Amhara and Tigrayan communities or nationalities, would opt for a federal system. I'm not sure there is a stamina within Ethiopia to go back to the situation of pre-19 unitary system. there has to be an understanding that this is not a country that is monocultural or monolingual, or a country that can be ruled just as a kind of like homogeneous society. There is diversity that needs to be respected and accommodated and managed at the same time.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the best way is really to continue the federal system, even if it means with some constitutional reforms. But I don't see any problem or any other better alternative to this system if it is to be a country that is composite and inclusive of all Ethiopians. Federalism will definitely help Ethiopia to stay together, and it will also allow, hopefully, if genuinely people adapt the system, a degree of self-rule and autonomy within the regions, and also a genuine shared rule. To conclude, there are always talks when it comes to Ethiopian constitution about Article 39, the famous Article 39. No one would really ignore this when talking about Ethiopia, and I'm happy to shed some light on this one and conclude my presentation. The first one is Article 39 is about the right to self-determination, including secession. So that means if any of the nations and nationalities of Ethiopia want to leave the union, they can do so legally, constitutionally. So I don't see any problem with that either, because after all, union or any kind of marriage has to be based on the free will of the people. And Ethiopia itself has not been established on the free will of the people. And that's why it needs this kind of approach to maintain the country, but under a free will rather than the will of the powerful rulers that have been ruling Ethiopia for the last 100 plus years. So that's one important aspect of it. Second, it also allows, if we are to talk about secession or the fear of secession, I don't think secession would be stopped by simply having an article on the constitution or not. The only difference is the constitution makes it more legal if people want to secede. But otherwise, if people feel in secession there is a benefit or interest, they would use any kind of methods to fulfill that ambition or that interest. And in many cases where there are no legal frameworks, the alternative would be violence. So again, even when looking at the discussions that comes up from time to time on the Ethiopian constitution, Article 39 is always raised as a problem, but I don't see it really as a problem. Instead, I actually see it as affirmation of the free will to stay united as a country. And second, even if there is a secession, then there is a legal way to achieve that without having to go through the violence that many countries go through. With that, I will come to an end, and thank you very much for your listening.
لو تخينا مسك نوفر لنا نفرح بلنا كنتبع لنا سبسي أي تفرح له نحق فرح نزقي فرح